Welcome to sunny Antalya, Turkey. This week I want to carry on with my lower body rehab series. If you've been keeping up with my channel, you'll know that I was having a little bit of back trouble. I felt like every time I was training, my back was tweaking a little bit every 4 or 5 weeks, and I just got to a point where I was unwilling to carry on, ignoring the problem. Now, I don't have any real specific injury or ailment that requires any kind of physiotherapy or me spending lots of money on any kind of rehab or professional. What I had is actually really common, especially among my demographic of the people I work with, and that is tight hip flexors. Also, I struggle to get my glutes to fire up, and I have a relatively weak core as well, but less weak nowadays because I've been working on it. This is so typical of people, especially in my demographic. So working people, we have sedentary jobs, seated at desks, we're commuting for hours, we're rushing around, we're being all and sundry to our families, battling after toddlers, and then we try and jam all our high intensity exercise into the 5 minutes of me time that we have, and then we wonder why things start hurting. We then start blaming our gym programs or what we're doing in the gym as being the problem, and not really taking a good look at our lifestyle. What you're doing in the gym is not really the thing that's hurting you, or certainly not the catalyst. What it is our approach to how we are moving our bodies, living our lives in general. So this is what this particular series is addressing. So I'll put cards up here, but so far we have covered foam rolling for the lower body, and then I followed up that video by taking you through a week in the life of being me when I'd hurt my back, and I showed you some of the protocols that I did to alleviate that immediate pain. Even though I did throw all my toys out of the pram and had a massive huff and stormed out the gym, that week was so instrumental in me actually putting together this package that I'm going to show you today. Carrying on this series, today I want to take you through my rehab and prehab stretch routine. This includes both dynamic and static stretches, and this routine is specifically targeted towards the lower body, especially those tight hip flexors. Not sure really what the hip flexors are. I urge you to go back to my foam rolling video because I talk quite extensively about the hip flexors, because they're a larger muscle group than you realise. It's a collection of muscles that all work together to help aid with hip flexion, and these are the things that can get tight and then other things around it switch off. Also, I'll be taking you through lots of other stretches which help with very typical and common muscular imbalances, and all using the glorious backdrop that is the pavilion over there. So let's go. This is going to be quite a long video, by the way, guys, like a really long one. So I'm going to do the same as what I did in my foam rolling video, and that is put timestamps below so you can just flash forward to the stretches that you want to do. But I do recommend, if you do have tight hip flexors, then you ought to go through the whole of this routine. We'll also be hitting the hamstrings, the calves, lower back, glutes. I think that's about it. Right, let's go. I'm gonna grab my husband. He doesn't know that we're about to do this on holiday. See you over there. Okay, bye. You'll notice that I make up a whole lot of random names for all my stretches. I can't help it. I've always named exercises with something that helps prompt my client's memory, and I'm in such a habit of it now that I often draw a blank when it comes to the formal names. We're starting off with lying leg sways to mobilise our lower back and hips, and it also starts to gently stretch out the glutes. I love this dynamic stretch so much because of its gentle nature, and when I have a client come into a session with literally no mobility, this is just such a great way to start mobilising everything. I want you to imagine that you're pushing your rib cage down into the floor and pushing your tummy button in, because you want to try and keep your whole back in contact with the floor. It's okay if you can't get your knees to the floor right away. You can just slowly increase your range of movement, and you'll find the more you do it, the more you'll be able to reach down to the floor. You're not trying to smash this out, it's gentle. Next, I'll move on to a variation of the leg sway by sitting upright and supporting myself with my hands behind me, and this specifically gets my glutes. The whole time I'm pushing my elevated knee outwards and I'm trying to keep my legs open. And you'll notice a common theme through nearly all my stretches. Even though I'm stretching in order to open up and stretch out my muscle fibres and increase my flexibility, I'm always trying to provide resistance through the movement, because I'm not really just looking at stretching and lengthening, but I'm also trying to increase my strength at the same time. I'm no yogi, but I do try and make my stretch routine somewhat fluid, so I do try and keep myself moving the entire time. And Lord knows what I'm going to call this next stretch that I'm doing. I'm going to call it a reverse scorpion stretch. You'll know what a scorpion stretch is because we are going to do that as part of this routine. For this stretch, you want to lay yourself back down on the floor with your knees bent and open your arms up wide so your palms are up. The whole time I want you to try and keep your shoulder and arms and upper back flat to the floor, so no arching through your lower back. Keep your knees bent, and this time as you sway from one side to the other, take the leg that's on top out and over, and with each rep you want to try and stretch and straighten your leg more and more, and you're attempting to reach as far as you can to meet your upward facing palm. The great thing about this stretch is it has a carryover to meet your upper body. You'll find that it stretches through the front of the shoulders and your chest. Because of the rotation, your core will start to fire up as well. Whoa, sweaty man foot. Sorry about that, girls. Okay, so we're going to move on straight into the inverted pike stretch. This stretch I find a little bit aggressive for me personally. I get so completely tight and wound up through my upper back and my neck that I sometimes omit it from my own stretch routine, and I'll only do it if I foam rolled first. However, this stretch is such a good stretch for stretching out the whole of the posterior chain. So that is everything from the calves right up to the very top of your spine. You'll see as we do this exercise, the intention is always to push our feet into the floor and straighten the knees as much as possible. And that's just so you can stretch through both the upper and lower parts of the hamstrings. Typically, I don't get anyone to bounce through a stretch, but my husband always has, so you might have noticed that. But you must notice he also keeps it very controlled, and he uses it as a way of making a static stretch more dynamic and more pertinent to a pre-workout warm-up. We make this whole stretch more dynamic, firstly by alternating the stretch between leg to leg, and then taking it back to straight legs and slowly controlling a side-to-side rock. You would have seen Rem doing that a minute ago. There are no particular methods to this. It's just working with our own body, listening to it, leaning into the stretches as we go, and keeping the movement very controlled. I also play around with my hand positions, so here you can see I'm taking my hands over my head to reach towards my feet, and this is not for anything in particular, it just, I feel like it stretches out different areas on my back. When I return to sitting, I always sit myself up, put my hands behind my back and stretch and open my chest like this. Alright, let's move into the scorpion stretch I was talking about earlier. Now this is a fantastic stretch that really works on mobilising the hip flexors and fires up the glutes simultaneously. Now, it is so typical that the majority of people I work with, and I can certainly say this for myself, is due to our lifestyle where we're inactive, we sit the majority of the time, our hip flexors become super tight and our glutes will switch off. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work out why this happens. I mean, just look at yourself next time you're at the office. Slumped in the chair, bum tucked in, so hunched over shoulders and chin jutting forward like you're a goose in flight. It's not cool. So that kind of explains why these tight hip flexors and inactive glutes seem to be such a common thing. Now personally, I think this is quite an advanced stretch, and if you don't yet have the mobility to pike your legs up and over towards your outstretched hands, you may find that all this does is go into your lower back. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one today. Instead, we're going to talk about the half pigeon stretch. I think it's called the half pigeon stretch anyway. It specifically stretches out the hip flexors and the glutes, and it relaxes the piriformis and the psoas muscles. Now, the chances are you've heard of the piriformis. It's a tiny little bastard of a muscle that sits so deep in the buttocks, and it seems to be tight on just about anyone who's lucky enough to have a bottom. And the psoas muscles is the long muscle that goes right around your lower back and inserts to the inside of your femur. So when you're at the gym and every time you try and do an ab exercise or you try and deadlift, you go, my back. Well, yeah, that one is tight. The whole collection of muscles tight. Before I'll change sides, I'll pull my outstretched leg in a little bit closer to me, and I try and open up my leg by driving my knee up and down towards the mat. And this is really just to stretch through all my hip adductor muscles, which also have a key role in hip flexion. I'll likely do that, say like 8 to 12 repetitions on each side. And then often I will drop down into the stretch again, just to really make sure those glutes are stretched out. I always take the opportunity to reach forward and across my body during this stretch, just to try and stretch out my QL, which is another muscle that aids in lateral flexion of the spine. But to be honest, I just don't feel it. I seem like nothing I do in stretching helps my QL, so I just stick with a foam roller. The nice thing about the reach across is it actually adds a deeper stretch through my glutes and also increases my stretch through my thigh, or more specifically the hip flexor muscle called the rectus femoris. Any chance to say the word rectus, hey? Right, we're going to start doing more and more stretches that really target the muscles of the inner thigh, which also aid in hip flexion. So we may as well have a little look about what they are. So we have the adductor muscles, which are the adductor longus, brevis, gracilis, and as I said, these all aid in hip flexions as well. And this stretch that Rem's doing here wasn't actually originally part of my own routine. I do quite a bit of static stretching to target my inner thigh, but since I've taken up this stretch, I found it to be actually really beneficial to like my all over hip mobility, and I also found that it has a big carryover to foot and ankle mobility. So I pretty much always include this now as my pre-squat session warm-up. You want to try and keep your feet firmly pinned to the ground, so the ankle and foot have to move and stretch with the movement. I also like to pull up really tall and spend time in this position, which I'm sure has some sort of tantric yogi name, but I just call it a frog sit. Spiritual AF position, I suppose. I can actually sit there for a good couple of minutes like that. I find it incredibly comfortable, but I will then always pull myself down into this frog stretch position, and I'm trying to get my hips to open up as much as possible. So I'm also trying to push my knees down into the floor. This stretch I find to be so effective for stretching up like my groin and my adductors, but it's taken me a while to get this far with it. Any of my flexible friends out there, I'm sure, are thinking that isn't that far, but let me tell you, it's a vast improvement to what I could do before. I progress it by holding the position, and then I'll take a deep breath in, and then I'll breathe out, and then I'll push further into the stretch, and I'll repeat this for as long as I can bear, so like 3 times. Even though it is a super static stretch, I've always maintained the stance that dynamic stretching is far superior, so I do make it a more dynamic movement by trying to increase the stretch by coming up into a box position and moving back and forth with the stretch. Next movement is a half hero stretch. This is a static stretch and one that I almost certainly utilise before any leg session. I am super quad dominant, which means that I rely on my quads more than I do my glutes and my hams for any big movements like deadlifting, squatting, that sort of thing. So I'll perform this stretch with the view that it will actually switch off my quads a bit, so to speak. But I also do it outside of my gym sessions as a rehab exercise, simply because my hip flexors are just so damn tight. You can do a full hero stretch whereby you can put both legs up and out, but I can't even pretend to demonstrate that. If you're particularly tight like me, then you can pop yourself up onto your elbows. The lower you get to the floor, the more you'll increase the stretch, but you don't want to lay back down when you're all awkward and tight and be lifting your hips and arching your back. It will defeat the purpose. So keep it strict, prop yourself up if you need to. I will then take it into a very common stretch that would seem a lot of people do in their own stretch routines. However, there is a common mistake with it. People tend to arch their lower back and drive forward into the stretch with their pelvis anteriorly tilted, meaning that your butt bone, or your tailbone rather, is up. And this just simply kills the stretch and it renders it pretty useless. So the next time you do this, try tucking your butt bone underneath you, meaning you have dropped into a posterior tilt. And this means that the stretch will be strong through your hip flexors muscles and through the front of the leg, mostly your rec fem. And you can increase the stretch by reaching up. You will feel a stretch through your abs, and by all means take it to the side too. I do that. The whole time though, I want you to imagine that your back knee is being plastered to the floor, but you're trying to drive that knee forward. You're trying to drag it forward to be in front of your front foot. I then move into a whole array of different hip mobility drills that I actually learned from a YouTube and Instagram channel called Move You. So I'll actually put the link below because they're a really good resource if you are struggling with your stretching or any kind of lower back pain or any kind of pain. They're fabulous. It's taken what is a typical cat-cow movement into a hole drill that gets everything moving. You want to start with the normal cat-cow, or rather I call it hump and dump, but then you want to try and do the same movement but utilising only your pelvis. So basically you want to try and keep everything other than your pelvis still as possible. And then you're going to take this particular movement 3 ways. First you're going to go up and down as you are now, but then you're going to start wagging your tail from side to side. Then you're going to do both movements together, whereby you then start to draw a circle with your hips. And this sort of sets up the routine for the next few movements, where you're going to do exactly the same routine, but you're just going to move your leg into 2 other positions. The first position, you want to bring your leg forward to be in line with your arm, and you're going to repeat all 3 movements. So the trick is to keep pushing your knee into your arm, so you're always trying to keep tension throughout the muscles. So again, this isn't just about stretching, it's about strengthening as well. So first off, you're going to start with your hump and dump, then you'll move it into wagging your tail, and then you're going to start doing the circles. And I guess I do around 8 reps of each. It's really boring, but if you can stick with it, it's really effective. Now, I will say it is totally normal if you feel like you're hardly moving. This is actually the 3rd time I've ever had to film this, because in the months leading up to this, it hardly looked like I was moving at all because I was so tight. Next, you need to change position by taking the same leg out to the side, and you want to push your foot hard into the floor. This creates resistance, and you'll always have to remind yourself to do it, because this is what actually makes this stretch particularly hard. It's very easy to want to punk out of it, but remember, you're doing all the same movements, starting with humping and dumping, and then into wagging your tail from side to side. And this is the movement I actually find to be the most effective for stretching out my hip adductors and my groin. And then of course you want to finish off with doing your circles. I'm sorry this all looks a bit ridiculous, it really does. I'm watching this sequence back and it's actually quite painful for me to watch, but it is very effective. And of course you're not done there, because you're going to have to do it all again, all on the other side. And just to cheer this up a little bit around here, let's just do it on fast forward so you can have a little giggle. And that takes us to the very last stretch I do before I hit the squat rack. And these are called ostrich walks, I believe. I have never done these before, but Rem picked them up from the handstand workshop he did ages back. And they have been so good for actually me increasing my flexibility through my hamstrings. It's actually almost a bit of a ballistic stretch, but I find it really effective. You want to keep your hands and your legs as straight as possible, and I actually lock out my knees. You can also see where I split my trousers through the filming this workout. Right, that's it all done. There are of course countless stretches and approaches to mobility. These are just a handful of the ones that I do. I'm off. If you like this video, do give me a thumbs up and think about hitting that subscribe button. I'd also love to get to know you, so do leave me a comment below and check out my socials. Until then, I wish you well, I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you in my next video.